I think when it comes to minerals, we're all kind of groping in the dark, and because there's a lot of information that's been suppressed, I think,
Mm,
over the decades and over the century.
yeah.
But
Yeah, it's so
but
true.
yeah, but let me just give you an example of what drives me,
Mm,
and I think it will be a wonderful background for the questions that you're going to ask.
sure.
Because it's to me the most disruptive and vexing point of confusion in human physiology is a relationship between copper and iron. And we're led to believe that they live in separate worlds when in fact they are interdependent. Um, and the whole dynamic revolves around a critical enzyme that I talked about the other night called ferroxidase. And it's what allows for iron to be reduced, chemically reduced or biochemically reduced from +2 to plus, no, yeah, it's not reduced, it's being oxidized, excuse me. So we're going from +2 to +3. So when iron becomes +3, then it can be loaded onto transferrin, so it can be part of the iron recycling system, or it can be loaded into ferritin and be saved for further use, for
Mm,
later use. And it turns out that you can't load iron onto transferrin unless either ceruloplasmin or hephaestin are present. Again, they're both called multi-copper oxidases. It's a really big deal. And you can't load iron into ferritin unless it has the heavy chain function. Heavy chain is referring to the heavy metal copper. They always want you thinking that copper's the bad guy and
mm,
iron's going to get the pass. So the heavy metal copper is what allows iron to be stored safely. Where is that in the literature? It's there, but it's with the Ark of the Covenant um, in the Indiana Jones warehouse. And so that's a critical enzyme that is not allowed to be done in commercial labs. And it's very unavailable worldwide. There are like a handful of countries that actually allow the ferroxidase testing. So then, just to make it more exciting, there's another player in the copper iron dynamic called hepcidin. I think I
mhm,
may have mentioned that. And we are being trained, like circus bears, that hepcidin is the iron hormone. It's the iron hormone. Don't think about anything else but iron when you think about hepcidin. And what I've seen in the literature in the past, but was never able to confirm it, but for some reason today is the day for confirmation. I found 4 articles today that from noted scientists like Jamie Collins or Dr. Volpe or Joseph Prohaska or Michael Knudsen. These are big names in the copper world, but 4 independent articles that verify that hepcidin the protein can't be made without copper, and the protein can't be activated without copper. And so let me walk you through why that's important. If you're a really switched on hematologist, you know that when hepcidin is high, that person has inflammation and they have what's called functional iron deficiency. The iron is stuck in the recycling macrophages, can't get out because of a lack of copper to allow the iron doorway to open up. And that's what I mean, a really switched on the hematologist would see that high hepcidin. Okay, that's functional iron deficiency. But if hepcidin is really low, they know that that's an absolute sign of absolute iron deficiency. Oh, low hepcidin must give iron, must infuse iron. Well, it turns out that hepcidin is low with the genetic variants of hemochromatosis. Hepcidin is low when you have no retinol in your diet. Hepcidin is going to be low if you have a lot of vitamin D in your diet. Hepcidin will be low if you have a lot of ascorbic acid in your diet. And what do all of those things have in common? Well, it turns out that what they have in common is that they are all associated with low bioavailable copper. And so when hepcidin is low, the the training is must give iron, when in fact we don't know if it's lack of iron or lack of copper. And the only way to validate that and verify that is to do the ferroxidase assay, which is not allowed to be done. So we have this double um, blind situation where the doctor's not doing ferroxidase assay, not doing hepcidin blood testing. And so they see a low blood test, low iron on the blood test, and instinct says, got to give iron.
Hmm.
And that becomes the cornerstone for the the breakdown in most people's body. They have more inflammation. They're going to have more oxidative stress.
Hmm.
They're going to have more symptoms. They're going to be a better patient. And so that what I think is stunning is even with all, and I don't say this to be braggadocious, but even with all the studying I had done, I never understood that hepcidin was copper dependent. Now I do understand it, but now I've got to, you know, take on the task of educating doctors that the iron hormone that they've been trained as the sine qua non for determining iron status is in fact dependent upon copper. It's
Mm.
like it's amazing. So that just gives you a sense of how interconnected and interrelated they are, but it raises this level of confusion, as you can well imagine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for starting off with that. I think I just first want to acknowledge how knowledgeable you are about the human body, even though, you don't have the title of a doctor. Obviously, you spend seemingly every single day studying articles, and it seems like it's just become a seamless habit for you, and you love to do it, and you remain curious, which I think is like the biggest thing that's missing in the modern day world is just sheer curiosity and, like, questioning things that quite evidently obviously haven't been working. If you look at the stats on how people are doing with their health, whether it is like a, formalized documented statistic, or just like go talk to your friend, go talk to your mom, go talk to a family member, like it don't,
That's right.
seems like everyone's struggling with something. And so I love the title of your book, Cure Your Fatigue, because unfortunately, I think that yeah, attracts the attention of a lot of people, for better or worse. Like, I wish we weren't in this place, but if we want to try to make change, we gotta find the root, and that's obviously what you're all about. But I'm curious, like someone tuning into this podcast, let's say kind of I don't know if average Joe is the right terminology, but just someone that's like into health, maybe they've been taking supplements, maybe they're doing some holistic health things, and they just listen to all that terminology that you just discussed there. Is there a way that you could, in like layman's terms, or try and explain it to like a sixth grader of like, what is copper? Like, why does it really matter in the human body? How come I've never
Yeah.
heard of it? And how can it help my health?
Yeah. No, that's a great way to start the conversation. Um, so there's depending upon the source of information, it's anywhere between 82 and 92 minerals. I think um, that's a pretty well accepted fact. There's a bunch of minerals which would be naturally found in the seabed. That's really where they hang out. But they're supposed to also be in the soil, which is why it's so important for farming. But when you hear that they're 82, you think of a horizontal plane that they're all important. No, they're not all important. I think it's a hierarchy. I think it's a pyramid. And I would argue that copper is at the top of the pyramid. And right on the heels of copper would be iron and magnesium. And the reason why I structured it that way is that the two most toxic elements on planet Earth, we can't live without them, but they're very toxic. They're very hard on our body, are iron and oxygen. And and they like to play with each other. And what do they like to do? Create rust. And we recognize rust on the outside of our body, rusty nail, rusty pipe, rusty car. But we don't realize that the same rusting process is taking place inside our body. It's called plaque. Hmm. And copper's gift in our body is it's the only element on planet Earth that can regulate iron and oxygen at the same time and not create what's called oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is just a fancy scientific term for rust. And and when we're making oxidative stress, we're not making energy. So the key to making energy is to turn the oxygen molecule into two molecules of water. And when that happens inside our mitochondria, at a particular part of the mitochondria, which is loaded with copper, when oxygen becomes water, the energy molecules are released, and that's what really powers our body, what powers our function. I mean, 50% of our daily production of ATP, and we make our body weight in ATP every day, but 50% of it goes to for one function, managing the balance between sodium and potassium in our body. Enormous amount of energy being expended for that. And within that, 20% of that balancing act is happening in our brain. So it's this balancing act is really, really important. And we need a lot of ATP to make that happen. And I don't think doctors or nutritionists, for that matter, really know how energy is made at a very granular level. And so if you want to create energy, you got to have copper. If you want to clear the exhaust of making energy, you got to have copper. So the exhaust would be the superoxide molecule. It's very easy to make it. So superoxide just means the O2 molecule has an extra electron. It's kind of grumpy about it. And there's a very important enzyme in our body and in our mitochondria called superoxide dismutase. So superoxide is the form of oxygen. It's got the extra electron. Dismutase is a funny way of saying neutralize. And so what the superoxide dismutase does is it turns the superoxide back into oxygen and water. Thank you, Mother Nature. But you got to have copper to do that. And there is zinc there, but zinc is playing a structural role. Copper is playing a catalytic role. And what they want you thinking is that copper and zinc are equals. They're not. It's just like, I mean, it's fascinating when you get into the literature. But copper plays this exalted role in our body to run some very, very important enzymes. And so the start of our conversation was a little delayed by a member of the Amish community that I've met in Indiana. And his daughter-in-law has a form of EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and she's double jointed, but now she's developed mold sensitivity. And so I was just explaining to Sam how the body works and how copper and copper dependent enzymes would correct that. And he got it. He got it right away. And he said, would you talk to my daughter-in-law? I said, of course I would. So it's just the confusion or the lack of awareness of copper is
Mm,
pervasive.
mm,
And it's not just people who avoid electricity. But it's the thing is, it's been studied for over, I think the first documented study of copper in plants was like 1875. So it's been around, a recognized entity for a good long while, but it's been kind of pushed behind the curtain. And the way I describe it is there's a meme that runs medicine and nutrition on the planet. You're anemic and you're copper toxic. They want you thinking that you are low in iron, take more. They want you being afraid of copper and stop thinking about it, stop using it, when in fact it's just the opposite.
mm,
Now, the number one element on planet Earth is iron. 36% of the Earth's composition is iron. And I don't know, uh, humans are the most evolved species, at least they were before COVID. And so to believe in anemia means that the most evolved species has lost the natural ability to metabolize the number one element on the planet. It doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make sense until you discover copper. And then you find out that copper is the quiet conductor that's running the show, that is hiding behind a curtain. And how do you
mm,
spell curtain?
mhm,
CU-RTAIN. And so people have been shielded from this reality. Uh, I think in simple terms, there's no money in healthy humans. And so if we can take this Achilles heel element, copper, kind of push it off the screen,
Mm-hmm.
make sure people don't know about it, especially doctors and nutritionists,
Mm-hmm.
and then create this illusion that there's a growing preponderance of disease, and people believe in that.
Yeah.
And that goes back to Louis Pasteur believing in
Mm-hmm.
disease. And so once you've got people spooked by that narrative, then you've got customers for life.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting you say that because one of my favorite books is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And there's a quote in there that says, figure out what 95% of the world does and do the exact opposite. And
That's
that
very
is
cool.
applied to my life in so many ways, especially
I got to
unfortunately
write
for
that down.
yeah,
The
it's a
slight
good
is.
one. It's kind of similar to Atomic Habits, but there's a lot of great one-liners and yeah, just really heavy
Yeah.
truth hitters. But yeah, like I posted about that once on my Instagram. And like, look, when I talk about this stuff, I don't say it to like be different or because like I'm trying to be radical. It's like I'm saying these things because I believe that my duty on this planet, on this earth, is to serve the truth, even if it
Yeah.
hurts. And like I posted something a couple months ago that was like basically, if you want to be healthy in America, essentially do the exact opposite of what
Yeah.
people tell you to do. And
Exactly
that's
right.
I think that's like the hardest thing. And you know, you talked about the soil health, which could be a whole nother conversation, but to me, that's like that truly feels like the root issue. And you know, again, it can be even deeper, but I think it's like this foundational, fundamental, probably unconscious, subconscious belief that we're separate from nature, and as a result of that, a lot of people are operating from their ego and trying to
Right.
optimize for efficiency and money instead of like actual health. And you know, when I started my health journey, the reason I did so was because I healed 10 years of chronic acne and hemorrhoids within 5 weeks of enrolling into a nutrition course. And it was just this whole awakening is
Wow.
like, how come
That's
nobody
so
ever
cool.
taught me that food could have anything to do with my health? And so it's the same deal here. And it's like, you know, you think about all these ancient herbs and foods and spices. It's like, you know, cacao has been a medicinal thing for thousands and
Right.
thousands of years, and
That's right.
ashwagandha and like these like quote superfoods that are really just the foods that we're designed to eat. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Flexner report, but I feel like that really changed the paradigm on healthcare.
Oh,
And
totally.
so
Yeah.
it's like, you're right. Like this is like, it could be known, it should be known. It's not really new information. It's just stuff that's been, yeah, swept under the rug. And it's the same thing with like regenerative farming. People are like, oh, like this is like the new health trend is gut health, or the new health trend is
Right.
like regenerative farming. It's like, no, that's actually just returning to how we're biologically designed and biologically wired. But I mean, I've been in the health space for 7 years. I feel like I know a lot of things. And at the same time, I'm always willing to admit what I don't know and what else might be out there. And you know, I've heard a lot about like carbon, and I've heard obviously and know pretty deeply about magnesium. Why is it that like magnesium is so kind of glorified for good reason, but why is copper not? Because I feel like if you talk to 10 people, nine of them are going to be like, I don't know anything about copper, why that would even be important. Yeah, I know magnesium is important. Like that's such a big trend in the health space, but how come copper is not talked about? And why do doctors and or is there any evidence that like at a certain level it is toxic? I'm curious about that.
Okay. Um, Again, back to the hierarchy. Copper's at the top, and then magnesium's secondary to copper. And the reason why I put it that way is that um, if copper is not bioavailable, and when I say that, what I'm referring to is if the copper enzymes that run the body are not available, and those are very sophisticated, very powerful enzymes, then iron will become dysfunctional. And and it happens in a nanosecond. And so what's important for the listener to understand is that we have a giant iron recycling system coursing through our body 24/7. So we've been chatting now for about 15, 20 minutes. But every second of every second, we have to turn over 2.5 million red blood cells. And in the course of 24 hours, it's 200 billion red blood cells that need to be replaced. That represents 1% of our blood. Every day we have to replace 1% of our blood. And the pivotal part of that is iron, or the red blood cell goes into the spleen to be broken down. And then the iron needs to be released from the hemoglobin that's inside the red blood cell and get it connected to transferrin and make tracks for the bone marrow where it's going to be turned into red blood cells, 2.5 million every second. It's like, I mean, the numbers are mind blowing.
Mm.
And so copper is running that show, principally the release of the iron and then allowing the iron to get connected to the transferrin protein, transport protein. And then when you're in the process of making heme or making hemoglobin, um, you got to have copper. Copper's got to be present to make that happen. So copper has this vaulted role. And so if copper is down, iron becomes dysregulated. It can't get out of the recycling macrophages. It will begin to fester in the tissue. And when it festers, it's going to create oxidative stress. And whenever there's oxidative stress, magnesium takes it on the chin.
Mhm.
So there's a whole network of what are called kinase enzymes, and they respond to stress. And the kinase enzymes are all designed to have ATP attached to them. And when they get released, the enzyme is designed so that the last phosphate, the triphosphate, there's three, well, the last one gets cleaved off. And when that gets cleaved off, magnesium, which is between ATP 2 and 3, magnesium goes right into our urine.
Hmm.
And so I call it the magnesium burn rate. Depending upon how much stress you have in your world will dictate how much magnesium you lose daily. And so the part that people don't realize is that the greatest stressor on planet Earth is oxidative stress, iron and oxygen playing with each other inside our body. It's not billed that way in medicine and nutrition, but that is the biggest stressor. It's not the fight you have with your neighbor or your boss or whatever, or lousy diet. Those are important stressors, but the oxidative stress is the biggest consumer. And when copper's down, oxidative stress rises, and then magnesium is lost. And so a lot of people talk about the magnesium loss, and a lot of people focus on restoring magnesium. Well, you can drink a bucket full of magnesium, and you're going to alleviate symptoms, but you're not going to stop the copper iron conflict.
Mhm.
And that's the part that's been hidden for a long time. I mean, the really exalted copper scientists have known this for a century, but it's just not part of mainstream
Mhm.
medical and nutritional thought. And so that's where the confusion between copper and iron, or excuse me, copper and magnesium is that magnesium is a safe mineral. Oh, take as much as you want. It's not going to solve the underlying problem. The minute you start knocking on the copper and iron door, you're changing human physiology, and then you're changing the availability of someone for being a customer. And so that's really, really key.
Mhm.
Um, as it relates to the tail end of your question about under what conditions is copper toxic, it's a very popular concern, which I think is largely unfounded. It really goes back to a critical article that was written by Carl Pfeiffer, who was he was a pharmacist before he became a psychiatrist. That should make people a little nervous.
Mhm.
And he wrote an article in the mid 60s talking about um, how copper can become unbound from ceruloplasmin under stress. And that is true. There are conditions like if our blood sugar gets too high, copper gets released from the ceruloplasmin. If our urea gets too high, gets above 7 or 8, it's gonna do the same thing. If we're exposed to certain chemicals like ascorbic acid or antibiotics or hormone replacement therapy, there's a whole bunch of very
Mhm.
popular chemicals that are causing the ceruloplasmin protein to be denatured, and then copper comes out. Well, that process of coming out of ceruloplasmin has been deemed it's unbound copper, therefore it's toxic. Well, actually, there is no unbound copper. It's an established fact that um, there's less than one atom of unbound copper in normal tissue, less than one per cell, less than one atom per cell. How much unbound iron is there per normal cell? 10 million atoms of iron. And so we've been trained to think of copper being the toxin and give iron the pass. But when you learn that when a woman gets pregnant, within 2 weeks of conception, her copper level in her body is going to double, and her ceruloplasmin level is going to triple
Mm.
within the first couple of weeks of getting conception. Why would Mother Nature do that? If copper were toxic, if it were truly a threat, why, under the most sensitive condition of pregnancy, why would copper double and ceruloplasmin triple? Just again, it doesn't pass the sniff test. What's happened is copper is getting blamed for symptoms that are really iron driven.
Mm.
And so when people take a bolus of copper, some people get nauseous, or they'll get a headache, or they'll get racing mind. And what no one has ever revealed is that when copper comes into our body, it has this very powerful effect on iron. It mobilizes iron. And trust me, you've got stored iron all over your body, especially your stomach and your brain,
Mm.
most likely your heart, maybe in your kidneys as well. And when you take a bolus of copper and like that, the iron gets mobilized, and the symptoms you're experiencing are iron-driven symptoms, but copper always gets the blame.
Mm.
So it's a very popular thing. Also in behavioral health, especially very extreme cases like schizophrenia, they love to blame the copper for those conditions. Because what you'll see, if you have someone who does have schizophrenia, their copper levels might go up into the 200s, might go up to 250. And so the copper is being unbound from ceruloplasmin. Do you think possibly there's a reason for that? Of course, there's a reason. The immune system runs on that copper. You can't activate macrophages, and you can't activate neutrophils if you don't have this unbound form of copper that is being mobilized and used in these critical immune players. But also, there's a very important, as I mentioned a little bit ago, we've got this very important iron hormone, hepcidin, which is responding to a perceived threat. Well, it doesn't get activated if you don't have copper available. And so I think the lack of sophisticated education about copper breeds fear of
Mm.
copper that gets misinterpreted as copper toxicity.
Right.
And so I'm working on a book now that'll probably be out in the fall, but it's called The Myth of Copper Toxicity.
Mm.
And it's just going to tease out all of these uh, wives' tales about copper this, copper that. But there's a reason why the body is using that copper in a very constructive way, but it's
Mm.
been misinterpreted over the decades by the iron crowd.
And so you're saying it's more, and from what I remember from your speech in which I met you at, that it's more of like a influx of too much iron that throws off the copper, or it's not enough copper, or a little bit of both.
It's a
And
great
like, and
question.
what is the reason for like, is the reason for the copper quote deficiencies or the bioavailability you're saying because of like the poor soil health, or it's just like, too much iron, or yeah, where does that kind of stem from?
Great question. Um, uh, we've got a little bit of frick and frack going on. We clearly have a shortage of copper in the environment. Um, there's the foods that we have historically used for copper, like organ meats, shellfish, nuts and seeds, broadleafy greens, mollusks, especially snails. Snails and butter, great source of bioavailable copper. But those food sources have been compromised because of glyphosate. And
Mm,
glyphosate has a heat-seeking property for chelating copper, which is why
mm,
they use it. And so our world has changed since the 1970s. But it was first patented in the 50s, but it was applied as an herbicide in the 70s. And the world changed as a result of that. And I think we're now witnessing the third generation of that change because we're 50 some years into the process.
The lab experiment, yeah.
It's a lab experiment. And so
That we never signed
copper,
up for.
exactly. Well, maybe at some spiritual level we might have, but at a human level, no.
Hmm.
But the lab experiment is in fact taking copper out of the environment. It's
Hmm.
taking copper out of our soil, taking copper out of the produce, taking copper out of the animals, taking copper out of the humans. And that's well documented. That there's a wonderful paper by Leslie Clavé, who's an MD, PhD. He's a cardiologist and a copper scientist, and he published a wonderful article in October of 22, as people were still in their COVID stupor. But he talked about the impact of chronic copper deficiency.
Hmm.
He knew what was going on. He's a very, very thoughtful but clever individual to write an article to help people understand where the real problem was. And so what most people don't know about COVID is COV stands for copper's vanished, and ID stands for iron's dysregulated. And that's a personal definition of it, but it
Hmm.
fits. When you
Hmm.
begin to understand the cytokine storm, and you begin to understand what drove the COVID cocktail, ascorbic acid, vitamin D, and zinc are the perfect triad to kill copper in the human body. You begin to wonder what was really going on. But the thing is, it is a two-part dynamic, as you alluded to in your question. You've got a deficiency of copper in the food system, coupled with an abundance of iron in our food, in our supplements, and in the iron infusions that people are getting with increasing fervor around the world. And so in 2018 and 2020, Jamie Collins at the University of Florida was able to prove using a rodent model, couple different rodent models, but scaling back the amount of iron that we get exposed to in our daily life, scaling it back for a rodent, applying that amount of iron and seeing what happened to the copper metabolism in their body, and it shut down.
Hmm.
Copper is just lights out. And so people don't know this dynamic about copper being the general regulating iron, but if iron gets too high, it's just going to really shut down the whole mechanism.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What would you
Well,
say?
it does, but it's a very unsettling sense.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's a whole can of worms. I feel like I also wanted to get into, whether it be now or at some point in the conversation. It's just like it can be so earth-shattering to like hear these things, and that I think that's actually exactly how you start your book. Is like I want you to basically just have a completely open mind and kind
Mm.
of, yeah, be willing to question everything you've ever known about health. And I think that's really hard for the human ego to hear
Mm.
and to
Absolutely.
digest, no pun intended. It's like, well, what do you mean I shouldn't really maybe necessarily trust exactly every single word my doctor says about XYZ? Or like, what do you mean? Like, what is copper? How come I've never been taught about that? And so I think that's a huge part of the transition journey. And I think this is what this is. And especially since COVID, I think you're right. It's just been this whole like paradigm shift. And obviously there's a lot of truth starting to be revealed. And I think it's great. And it's awesome that this is happening, but it's also like really tough for people to hear. It's like there's real the real
Everybody.
like ego death that needs to happen. So yeah, how do you?
Out of 100 people, only two or three will be open to this message.
Mm,
Most people shut down, and they don't want to know what they don't know,
mm. Well,
which is
that's a question I have is like I feel like there's so many like, oh, this is the, miracle supplement, or this is like you have to just take this probiotic, or this is the thing that nobody knows about. How do you try to like position teaching this to the everyday consumer, teaching it to people in the healthcare space that although like it is a crucial quote one thing, it's not just like a gimmick, or it's not just like this,
no.
all these like MLM companies that are like, oh, if you take this one thing, it's going to change your life. Or if you do use this water machine, your whole health is going to
Right.
change. You're going to cure cancer, all
Exactly.
this stuff. Like, how have you been positioning it? Like, how's it been going? And like, how would you say it's different than all these other like, one quick fix tools we've been given?
The whole focus of the root cause protocol and the origin of it, um, when I first got into this work 17 years ago, I was drawn to magnesium. That was my first love. And so I became known as the Magnesium Man. And then I began to realize that magnesium is lost to stress.
Hmm.
It took me 7 years to figure out that oxidative stress was what was causing the magnesium loss. And then, so why the oxidative stress? Oh, it's a fight between copper and iron. That was a very methodical process of 7 years of research to piece all that together. It wasn't like I picked up a textbook. Oh yeah, okay, now I get it. It's like, I think people think just kind of have these dreams and suddenly it all makes sense. It's like, no, it's a day by day slugging it out in the research. Either I'm slow or they're very clever. I think it's a little bit of both. But the thing is, um, the key is getting people to realize that if and the whole basis of the book is cure your fatigue. I was really inspired by the work of Douglas Wallace, who's a famous geneticist at Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, who admonishes his colleagues that you don't understand how energy is made. And because they don't understand how energy is made, they believe in disease. That's the whole catch is once
Hmm.
you once you understand the energy paradigm, once you understand the fight between Pasteur and Béchamp back in the 1850s, they were fighting about particle versus field. Well, Pasteur was focusing on the pathogenic particle. Béchamp was talking about the energetic field of the body. And the field should be able to take care of it. And what happens is when the energy field drops, that's when the pathogens wake up.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Béchamp understood that. Why? Because he had two PhDs and he was an MD. He was the most decorated scientist in Europe at the time. Pasteur, well, he was supported by the moneyed interest. What was his education? He got a PhD in pharmacy from a correspondence course, a 1 year correspondence course. So that begins to color the whole narrative that's been running the show. But the key is understanding that energy is central to our well-being. It's central to our immune system. And I learned that through the COVID years, that the B cells and T cells, if they don't have energy, they can't communicate. They can't work their magic. And if you're doing a COVID cocktail, which is wiping out copper, then
Mm.
the mitochondria are completely compromised because they run on the intelligence and the dynamic properties of the copper molecule or copper atom. But the thing is, if you don't know that, then it appears more mysterious. And
Yeah.
so it's getting people to focus on the energy and
Mm.
ignore the enemies. And that's really
Yeah.
mantras is
I love that. Yeah, I feel
ignore.
like common sense isn't always common practice, but it's like, the rate of repair has to outpace the rate of damage. And I feel like I
Exactly.
see this a lot with clients that I work with, and I was down that rabbit hole too. I'm not saying some of it isn't helpful, and you learn a lot throughout your healing journey, but you're right. Like when I went through my burnout journey, I like did the HTMA test, I did the SIBO test, I did the 3-day stool
Mhm.
test, I did the testosterone test, the hormone test, like everything you can
Sure.
imagine. And again, that's
Absolutely.
valuable to like kind of get that inside look, but I realized I was like, oh, it must be from this like mold, like
Right.
a
Right.
slight bit of mold from this test, or like it must be from the dysbiosis in my gut, which obviously, can come from just stress alone. And just, I grew up on antibiotics through the skin health stuff and through ear infections and just living in America, right? Glyphosate, it's like insane.
Right.
But
Yep.
you're right. It's like, and this is why I'm so passionate about the fact that we're not separate from nature, and that like when you return to how I believe we're wired to live, which is in cohesion with nature, it will just bring us back to homeostasis. And I'm sure you
Sure.
know this all too well, is like
Yeah.
the human body literally heals itself. We just have to get out of its way. And if we're
Exactly.
constantly being like, oh, like we need to get rid of the, mold toxicity, we need to get rid of the parasites. It's like these things are within us for a reason. And like you said, like once the rate of damage is too high, then like they kind of come out to play. But if you're producing energy and your ATP is, doing what it's
Right.
supposed to be doing, like it's almost like it just cancels it out. And unfortunately, obviously, there's a lot of things that can cause a lot of damage in the modern day world. So it's
That's
like
right.
it's hard to be healthy, but it's also hard to be unhealthy.
Well, the part that people didn't realize, and I didn't realize it either. I mean, I worked in healthcare. I was a hospital exec and consultant for 30 plus years. Um, I was taking supplements. I didn't know what I was doing.
Mm.
But I just thought, okay, I need a one a day or something like a one a day. I need a zinc.
Mm.
And so I did all the things that people are doing, and then had this epiphany and began to realize, oh my gosh, what they're telling us to do is wrong. It's just the opposite of what we need. And that devotion to what they tell us to do gets in the way of the body's natural ability to heal
Exactly.
itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously supplements are, you know, for the most part, depending on quality and stuff, are way more effective and have little to zero side effects compared to like medications that can, toxicate the body, as I'm sure you know well as well. But I'm
Sure.
curious, you said absorbic acid, vitamin D, and I think one other. Yeah, can you
Zinc,
tell
zinc,
the zinc?
zinc.
Yeah, because to be honest, I mean, yeah, I don't. Maybe like once a year, I'll just go through like a 30-day supply of zinc. But when I went to your speech and you t talked about that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Again, I'm pretty willing to be like, oh, maybe I'm doing
Yeah.
something wrong or something could change. So, could you share with the audience like why those are quote bad or like how it throws off the balance of copper and iron
Yeah.
and why they're not so great for the body?
Yeah. So ascorbic acid, it it's very popular, very prevalent. Was
Vitamin C, right? For those who don't
right.
know. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Synthetic. Yeah.
synthetic,
Yeah, yeah.
and so it shouldn't be called vitamin C.
Mm.
It should be called ascorbic acid.
Hmm.
Um, and what's really entertaining is everyone knows that Albert Szent-Györgyi um, discovered vitamin C, ascorbic acid, and it's the anti-scorbutic factor, right? Except that on July 4th, 1936, about 18 months before he got the Nobel Prize, he wrote a letter to the editors at Nature Journal. Doesn't get any bigger than that.
Hmm.
Nature's at the top of the heap. And in this article, he said, ascorbic acid does not cure scurvy. It's in black and white. The guy who gets the Nobel tells the editors at Nature, these are the facts. And in fact, it's um, the permeability factor, rutin, bioflavonoids, which have copper in them, ding, 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 that are enabling the anti-scorbutic factor. That got lost to the ages. I don't know how he ever accepted the Nobel Prize, but he did. But the fact of the matter is, there's a big difference between ascorbic acid, the synthetic derived um, metabolite that is made with GMO corn and
Mm.
sulfuric acid in one lab in China.
Jeez.
One lab makes it and sells it worldwide, and 150 manufacturers or
Damn.
bottlers say, my ascorbic acid is stronger than your ascorbic acid, and they're all coming from one lab.
That's crazy.
And, and so what's really significant is the first really accepted publication about ceruloplasmin was in 1948 by Holmberg and Laurel, two Swedish physiologists. They were writing about this copper protein that no one had ever heard of. And here we are, almost a century later. No one still knows what they are or knows what the protein is. But in that article, they make a very specific um, point to let people know that the intake of ascorbic acid will denature ceruloplasmin. Well, what does denature mean? It causes it to unfold. And again, for the benefit of the listeners, we're not talking about a simple protein. Right? To give you an order of magnitude, everyone's worried about insulin right now. Insulin is 45 amino acids. That's pretty decent size. Has no metals in it at all. Ceruloplasmin is 1,046 amino acids and has 8 copper atoms in it. It's a beast. It's an absolute beast inside the body. Very intricate origami that makes it, the folding of the proteins is very, very, very intricate. And when it's exposed to ascorbic acid, those folds unfold and the copper comes rushing out like diarrhea, like they didn't know that. And so the cornerstone of ascorbic acid is to help people with cancer. Okay, well, high dose ascorbic acid creates a lot of hydrogen peroxide, which will kill the cancer cell. Very, very effective at doing that. But you have to back up. What is the cancer cell? It's an adolescent cell. It's an adult cell that's become iron toxic, and it becomes adolescent in its thought process and its function. and it reverts to a very ancient form of metabolism. I don't think the object is to kill the cancer cell. The object is to rehabilitate the cell
Mm.
and get it
Hmm.
back to adult form. And you
Yeah.
can do that with IP6. IP6 will revert the adolescent cell back to an adult cell so it can think properly.
What is IP6?
Inositol hexaphosphate, which is an iron chelator.
Hmm.
Um, great,
That's a
great
big thing
product.
for women with like PCOS, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Very much so.
Hmm.
And so, a lot of confusion about ascorbic acid, and not many people know that the design of the vitamin C complex has an enzyme called tyrosinase. There's a steering wheel, and there's four wheels and a cover to the car. Think of the vitamin C complex as a car. Ascorbic acid is the cover of the car. Ascorbic acid is a component of the vitamin C complex, but there's other, the Rutin factors, bioflavonoids, J factors, K factors, P factors. These are all other components of the vitamin C complex that no one ever likes to talk about. And the enzyme that is the engine of vitamin C, tyrosinase, is one of the most important enzymes in our body that runs melanin for color, but it's also running a lot of the integrity of the red blood cell
Hmm.
is a function of the availability of tyrosinase in the body. It's a really big deal. And and so tyrosinase has been compromised by the food industry by using tyrosinase inhibitors. Well, why would they do that? Well,
Hmm.
tyrosinase is what drives the browning process of food. You
Hmm.
don't want your food spoiled, do you? So what do the manufacturers do? They focus on shelf life, not human life.
Hmm.
So they optimize shelf life, all the while killing the people who are eating the food.
That's a good one. Optimize for shelf life over human life. Never
Right.
thought about that way.
And so there's a lot of confusion about ascorbic acid and vitamin C.
Hmm.
Then let's get to vitamin D. Um, Again, back in the 19 teens and 1920s, there was a lot of scientists studying retinol,
Hmm. That's
real
vitamin A, yeah?
vitamin A.
Okay.
Very important metabolite, especially for copper metabolism.
Hmm.
What were they doing with the vitamin D fraction of those studies back in the 1920s? They were throwing it in the garbage. Interesting how times change, right? And now vitamin D is apparently the most important metabolite on the planet, and we should just take that above everything else. Well, if you believe that, then I've got a bridge to sell you. I used to say I would sell you my used BMW, but I got rid of my used BMW. It was just costing me too much money. But the thing is, vitamin D has many properties, but the two most significant are one, and you can prove this on a hair test. It causes renal potassium wasting. And anyone who takes vitamin D is going to have a potassium of one or less than one on a hair test. Well, what does that do? Well, the sodium is always going to be higher than that, which means you're going to have raging stress, which means you're going to have what? Oh, yeah, magnesium loss. And then we've just destabilized the cell and
Hmm.
stabilized the tissue. So vitamin D is not the media darling that it's been made out to be. There is a dark side to vitamin D.
Yeah.
And Mother Nature um, likes pairs. It doesn't like solo operators.
Hmm.
So calcium and magnesium work together. Sodium and potassium work together. Copper and iron
Duality
work
of life.
the
Yeah.
duality of life. Vitamin
Hmm.
A and vitamin D work together.
Hmm.
Why, if you're preoccupied with vitamin D, what are you doing to vitamin A? You're preventing its uptake in the intestine.
Hmm.
It's a binary uptake mechanism. If vitamin D is prevalent, it's not going to let vitamin A in. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what happens. Until the second property of vitamin D is it causes iron accumulation in the tissue. That's the problem. Again, if you believe that you're anemic, you want that vitamin D building up your iron, when in fact you are so iron toxic, you have no idea how much iron you have in your body. But if you're curious, take your age, multiply it times 365, and that's how many milligrams of iron you have in your body. You're going to be somewhere in the 20,000 range, 20,000 milligrams. and men are designed for 5,000, women are designed for 4,000 milligrams of iron. So you've been sold a bill of goods, and what is one of the cornerstones of the food industry is iron fortification,
Hmm.
iron supplementation. And so again, wink, wink, they want you thinking that you're anemic, wink, wink, take more iron, wink, wink, and then I have a customer for life.
Hmm.
And so vitamin D is only aggravating that condition. Again, these are not my opinions. This is backed up in the research, and there's behind our paywall, you can go to the webinar that talks about the other side of vitamin D. I
Hmm.
think you'd find it enlightening. Um, and then we get to the third factor, zinc. Well, everyone was introduced to zinc is going to save my ass during COVID because it's going to stop the replication of the virus, right? What they forgot to tell you is that all pathogens, bacteria, fungus, virus, and parasites, all cave in the presence of one metal, copper. And so, why are we worrying about replication when the virus can't exist if there's copper in the body? And so they forgot to tell us that. What they also forgot to tell us about zinc is that it blocks copper uptake, which is exactly what they want. Um, it will kill the cytochrome C oxidase enzyme in the mitochondrial complex, ETC. That's a problem. And it kills the ferroxidase enzyme function, which is essential for moving iron in the iron recycling program. And so, if you don't know about the iron recycling program, if you don't know how the mitochondria really work, if you don't understand that copper is essential for basically running the body, then you're going to focus on the anti-replicating capacity of zinc and not realize that you're basically shooting yourself in the foot.
Hmm.
And so you've got these three very popular, very recognized nutrients that are undermining the life-affirming metabolism of copper. And so out of sight, out of mind. If I don't know
Hmm.
about copper, then I'm not going to worry about it.
Hmm.
And so that's what's happened is the education of doctors and nutritionists has been very parsed, very compartmentalized. And so they don't know the full story about these nutrients. And so it's a case of it ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure. It
Hmm.
just ain't so.
Hmm.
And so the lack of understanding of the importance of bioavailable copper, made bioavailable in large part because of vitamin A and
Hmm.
its role in firing up the copper pumps that load up the enzymes. Um, it's a whole nother world that is not part of the formal medical and nutritional education.
Yeah, and I think what you said about kind of like supplementation and just things in general in the modern day world in isolation on its own, there's always like that duality and a balance between things. And I think again, like going back to the depletion of the soil, that obviously plays a huge factor. And to your point, it's like, okay, if you're getting vitamin C from an orange or from a bell pepper, or you're getting zinc from like an oyster or something, like that's like, gifted from Mother Nature. That's probably going to have, number one, probably a lot more bioavailability. And number two, like it's coming with all these like different minerals and just like natural enzymes that God gave us. But when you just try to like have this reductionist mindset of like, okay, if iron's low, then that means we must just supplement with it. Or if like your vitamin
Right.
D is low, then just supplement with it. It's like to your point, which I think is beautiful, is like there's obviously always a root cause behind something. And instead of just trying to patch the hole, it's like how can we actually seal it up? Or instead of trying to take buckets of water out of the boat that's got the hole in the bottom, it's like, well, what are we doing? So it's really cool to see how much you've just gone so deep into the research. And I'm sure now that people, hopefully who are willing to hear this and be open to new information around actually how to heal themselves. I know obviously you've got like your protocol, it's probably available on your website and stuff, but I'm sure people are chomping at the bit like, okay, what causes the increase in iron in my body? Like, what should I keep an eye out for? What should I avoid? And then, yeah, what are some like good forms of creating more bioavailable copper in the body when it comes to like food and things like that, supplements?
So yeah, great points that you're making and points to emphasize. So that the whole focus of the root cause protocol is to increase the production of this protein, ceruloplasmin, to ensure optimal energy optimization. That's the whole thing in a nutshell, in one
Mm,
sentence.
mm,
And where it came from was I was reading an article by Ray Peat, famous physiologist who focused on estrogen in his training. Um, in a wonderful article he wrote, I'm not sure when it was written, but it was on the dysfunction of iron, or the dangers of dysfunctional iron. And towards the end of the article, it said, to my knowledge, no one has ever come up with a recipe for increasing ceruloplasmin. And that really hit home for me. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. That's
mm,
really what the RCP does. And so there's a series of stops and starts. And the stops are to stop doing what they're telling us to do. Stop taking ascorbic acid, stop taking calcium, stop taking iron supplements, stop taking vitamin D. We're not against vitamin D, but get it in your cod liver oil, not in a
mm, mm,
synthetic supplement made from sheep lanolin. That's God
mm,
knows what they've done to it.
mhm,
And so it's getting people to wake up to the fact that there are natural sources of nutrients that we can get. And so the stops are very prescription. Stop taking, stop eating um, fast food. That'd be a great thing. Stop eating out of a box. That's a bad
mhm,
thing. Things like
mhm,
that, and get people more aligned with the principles of Weston A. Price. Eat real food. Eat food that your ancestors would recognize. The average person sat down with their great great grandparents. They wouldn't have a clue what people were eating. They
mm,
wouldn't recognize the food that we take for granted now. But it's also making sure that we have these key nutrients, especially the minerals and the vitamins. Don't get your B vitamins from a bottle. Get them from bee pollen. Get them from beef liver.
mm,
Beef liver. I mean, they gave a Nobel Prize in 1934 to three physicians using beef liver to cure anemia and pernicious anemia. It doesn't get any more entertaining than that. And these are guys from Hopkins and Harvard that get the Nobel Prize for that. And so we're just very prescriptive about making sure you've got minerals in your water. Make sure
mm,
you've got food that has minerals in them. The added challenge we've got, Mike, is just getting people to realize how devastating farming chemicals are to the availability of nutrients.
mm,
And it's just this monolithic challenge to get people to wake up to
mm.
we're basically we're eating Swiss cheese. There's big holes
Nailed
in,
it. Yeah.
and so we are Swiss cheese eating Swiss
Mm,
cheese, not realizing that we're not getting the nutrients that we need.
right.
And it's an uphill battle, both in terms of mindset,
Mm,
discipline to go out of your way to find the real food, but
mhm,
then to supplement with these nutrients that we talk about within the RCP. And and then we get out of the way. We're
mm,
not we're not worrying about, well, does the mitochondria know what to do with the copper that it gets? It's like, of course it knows what to do with it.
mhm,
You just have to make sure it's in the pipeline. And here's an example which I think is absolutely fascinating to give people a sense of why I'm so dismissive of most conventional thought.
mm,
There's a world-renowned endocrinologist in Germany. See, in Europe, they have what are called endocrinologists. Here in the States, we have what are called endocrinologists. And so his name is Jens Maytag, very smart cookie. But this is an article that was published 14 years ago in 2012. What is it couldn't possibly be important, right? And so what he points out is that the active form of thyroid, T3, is an oxygen sensor. Oh, that really changes things. Because the prevailing thought is that T3 is a spark plug. It makes the mitochondria do its job, and everything's fine when T3 is present. That's a story. It's a wonderful narrative, but it's not the truth. It's an oxygen sensor. Where does it hang out? At complex 4 of the mitochondria. Hmm, that's where oxygen is being turned into water. Oh, that's a pretty important place in the body. And and so T3 is sniffing to see, are we turning oxygen into water or are we creating oxidative stress? Are we turning oxygen into superoxide, superoxide into hydrogen peroxide into the hydroxyl radical? And it's a very smart um, metabolite, and it knows when water is not being made. And all hormones are signaling peptides. And so, what does the T3 hormone do? It signals back to the liver, oh, liver, would you please make some more ceruloplasmin so it can bring more copper to the mitochondria so we can burn the oxygen cleaner so we have more energy.
Hmm.
And see, that explanation makes so much more sense than, oh, T3 is a spark plug and it's making things work. It's like that's what a third grader would learn.
Mm,
But the elegance of the body is very sophisticated.
mm,
And and so why is this important? Well, it turns out that a really key part of the process is being able to turn iodine into iodide. Or I always get it back. Is it iodide into iodine or iodine into iodide? In any event, you can't do that without copper. Oh wow. Then when you get inside the nucleus and you want to make some thyroid hormone, want to make T4, the thyroid receptor, TR, needs to marry up with another nuclear receptor called RXR, retinoid X receptor. And so that heterodimer, they're different, but they're connected. So that heterodimer, when it's connected, activates the promoter region of the thyroid gene to make T4. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Where does RXR come from? It comes from retinol. You got to have retinol in your diet in order to make retinoic acids, which are hormones. There's four of them. Vitamin D only has one hormone, but retinol has four hormones. Maybe vitamin A is more important. And so then if we don't have retinol, we can't make the nuclear receptors. Well, there are RARs, RORs, RXRs, and RZRs. There's dozens of nuclear receptors that must be connected to other receptors to make the promoter regions work inside our nucleus. And what happens, what they'll tell you is that when you go hypothyroid, you're going to have increased cholesterol, right? That's the connection that's made. What they don't tell you is that, well, what is cholesterol? Well, it's an oxygen sink. It takes 11 molecules of oxygen to make one molecule of cholesterol.
mm,
And in 1973, our friend Leslie Clavet documented a study where he was able to prove that by denying animals copper in their diet, their cholesterol rose.
mm.
So that for that finding to become science, only one other lab needed to replicate his findings. Since 1973, over 30 labs have confirmed Dr. Clavet's finding. Why is 1973 important? Because that's when the statin machine started building. And so the whole narrative around cholesterol is, oh, you need a statin. No, actually, what you really need is you need bioavailable copper,
Hmm.
you need retinol,
Mm.
and
Vitamin
some
A.
vitamin A.
Hmm.
And so we realized on the root cause protocol forum that we were onto something
Mm.
years ago, more than a decade ago, when people who were adopting our stops and starts realized they didn't need as much thyroid medication. They didn't need any thyroid medication. They had more energy than they'd had in their entire lifetime.
Did you see that there was that recent recall in levothyroxine
Yep.
like a couple
Yep.
days ago? You strike me as the type of guy that'd be open to it, and I want to give context here that I think again going back to like the truth telling, even if it hurts. I mean, I've worked with like over 85 clients, and I've heard a lot of anecdotes just from like being a health coach and people reaching out on Instagram and all these platforms and stuff, and it's just like you can't make this stuff up. And unfortunately, the quote anecdotes aren't taken as seriously just because, it's not covered under, medical Western medicine literature. But to me, it's like from what I've seen, what I've deducted is to your point, it's like, oh, this just like, oh, this is wrong, so we'll give this pill, or this is wrong, so we'll give this
Mhm.
supplement. It's like
Right,
I've found though that like the society is basically trying to like outsmart nature and outsmart the human body, and the
right.
body's always going to communicate back to you that actually no, you can't. Whether it's a vitamin
No.
B12 IV drip that you think is healthy, it's like you can't bypass the gut and just like inject
Mm-mm.
this synthetic supplement into your body and expect to heal. It's like you have to return the body to homeostasis. So I'm curious because I've had a family history of Hashimoto's,
Okay.
autoimmune disease, cancer. Unfortunately, that's not very uncommon for someone in America in the modern day
No.
world. But like, I've found that from what I've seen, whether it be through family members or clients, it's like it seems that like certain medications can actually make you worse instead of actually like healing you. And not only does it like not solve the root problem, it just, people always say like put a band-aid on it or just like inhibits a certain enzyme to basically, have your numbers on the labs show up good, but that doesn't mean you've actually like healed anything. And the doctor can say, oh, like your numbers look good, like you're fine, like the medication's working. But
Right.
this is why I think like when women go on birth control for 10 to 12 years, maybe their acne goes away or like their, periods aren't as intense or whatever, the reason is that they took it to begin with. But then they come off it and then it's just like, woof, like
That's right.
all the symptoms just come rushing back in because they never actually healed the root cause. And then like I look at people who take heartburn medication and it's like, oh, their calcium's super low or their magnesium is super low or B12 is super low. It's because the human body is perfect. And
Right.
whenever it's being poisoned, or things are out of balance, it's going to, from an emergency standpoint, keep you safe in the very moment. So it's like it's going to strip maybe minerals from where it normally wouldn't, but it needs to try to like protect this or heal this. So that's what it's doing. And obviously, compounded over time, if you're taking medication over and over and over again, you're going to be chronically deficient in so many things. So that's a long way to kind of just give some context. I'm just curious, like, yeah, how do you kind of get people to kind of shift their mindset on like, there's this like Eastern medicine versus Western medicine. You can kind of like choose your path, whatever resonates with you. But now
Right.
I've kind of gotten to this point where like I almost feel like it's a duty to be like, this is a earth-shattering ego death like paradigm shift of, hey, not
Yep.
only is like Eastern medicine a different choice for you, but quite frankly, sometimes it feels like the other route is actually more damaging than it is helping you. And so it's like getting people to kind of go through that ego death and like accept this paradigm shift, I think is really difficult. But overall, I'm just
It is.
curious on your thoughts on medication, if they have a place. Just yeah, kind of your overall thoughts with it.
Well, I think that the one upside, if there was an upside from, maybe there's two upsides from COVID. One, phlebotomists went mobile. You can find more phlebotomists who are willing to come to your home to do blood donations, which is very nice. But the other upside, I think, was driving home the point that there's more to the story.
Mm,
We know that now, 6 years later, that we were fed a pack of lies, and that now there are people before Congress getting grilled for that. Whether anything comes of it, I don't know. But we know that there's more to the story. That's the
mm,
most important thing. Is what I'm really focused on in the work that I do is getting people to ask better questions
mm,
and demand better answers.
mm-hmm,
If the doctor says you're anemic, say, well, how did that happen, doctor?
mm.
How? And don't say, because I eat an iron fortified diet. I'm taking iron supplements. How did I become anemic? Well, it's an uncomfortable question, but people need to be asking those types of very simple questions. How did I become anemic? Walk me through the mechanisms of action.
They won't
And
know though. That's the problem. I know.
no,
I think most
I know.
doctors mean well. They just straight up aren't. They don't know.
They have the curiosity of a gnat. But
Mm,
maybe those types of questions will get them to ask more questions and get
mm,
them to dig a little deeper. But to your point, I think that we have been conditioned that in this reductionistic model, and the big pharma model is one gene, one protein, one function. And we isolate it down to that one element, and we're going to replicate that with some synthetic um, derivation of a natural substance.
mm-hmm.
Every drug that big pharma uses is found in nature, and they've just tweaked it so they can take ownership of it. But the problem they have with ceruloplasmin is it's one gene, it's one protein, but it's many functions.
Hmm.
That that blows up their business model. And so again, having worked in the hospital industry, I'm very mindful that people get medications. I grew up
Hmm.
in a family where medications were really important. Uh,
Hmm.
my mom had high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke. She was an alcoholic, had COPD from smoking. And so I've been around a lot of medications, but they don't really work. They treat symptoms, but they do not cure disease. And in fact, I would go so far as to say there really is no such thing as disease. But the
Mm.
goal is to minimize the symptoms. And most of the symptoms are a byproduct of lack of energy in some
But
areas of
do
the body.
you, sorry to interject, but do you think there's an aspect of where like people aren't realizing that it can sometimes actually be doing more damage than helping, and
Oh,
that sometimes the reason they're on the medication is because they're on it?
no, I think it's a great
Think that's
point.
possible? Yeah.
Absolutely possible. And I think people don't, again, back to the out of 100 people, two or three might want to strive for the truth. 97 people just want to have the problem go away.
Mm.
They want no ownership, no responsibility. I've got bad genes, like whatever it is, and they just want these symptoms to be gone. They have no ownership. They have no sense of responsibility. And I don't say that to be critical. It's just a fact. Most
Mm.
people don't want to take the time to work through and really learn, where did my body fall down? Where is my diet short? I remember when I first got into this work, I would be very meticulous about having people do a food diary. And I'll
Hmm.
never forget, this guy came in and I was going through his food diary. He said, he said, Morley, it was just a fluke. I had a really bad diet this week. I said, that's no problem. Let's do it once more. And
Hmm.
so had him do another food diary. And he says, I'm telling you, lightning struck twice. I don't know what happened, but I had a really bad diet this second
Hmm.
week. I said, okay, let's do it one more time.
Hmm.
He comes in, he says, all right, I have a shitty diet.
Hmm.
Let's just face facts. And so then we had him where he needed to be. He acknowledged and wanted to change his diet. If I had told him in the first meeting, oh, you got a problem, he wouldn't have listened. But
Hmm.
when he discovered it on his own and
Mm.
was
That's
willing to be
powerful.
open to
Yeah.
it, yeah,
Yeah.
that was the shift for
Has to come
him.
from within. Yeah.
Has to come from within. And most people want problems to go away. They don't want to, get out the microscope and analyze it and say, well, why do I have this problem? What
Mm.
what is the mechanism that's causing this? And so that's why people like you and I exist. We help be the translators to give people the motivation to learn that you don't need to understand copper metabolism the way I
Mm.
do. You just
Hmm.
need to know that this protocol works and
Mm.
that it would transform your life if you're willing to take the steps to do it.
Yeah, I always tell people like it's not your fault and it is your responsibility. And to give
Yep.
context, like, I just believe that the modern day world, especially over the past like 200 years, like you said, our great grandparents wouldn't really recognize any of the way that we
Right.
live. And so it's like you've just been stripped from nature and you've been stripped from
That's right.
homeostasis and how we're designed to live. So in that aspect, like you were born into it. It's not really your fault. And it's like at the end of the day, like, we're all dealt with certain cards. We're all, born at certain times and over the course of history. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like, especially for me as a millennial, I feel this like obligation, but also inspiration and empowerment to, yeah, kind of shift all the ways that we've been doing things and kind of
Right.
quote wake people up and just I believe I'm here on this planet to kind of yeah ask the difficult questions and spread the truth because people deserve the truth because health is a birthright. But it's like yeah I guess like I said it's difficult to be healthy in the modern day world, unfortunately. Like
It's
it's
a
crazy.
challenge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's also a challenge to be unhealthy and it's like you're either paying for more expensive, healthier food, which obviously is a systemic issue, or you're paying for like medical bills down the line. So it's like, do you want to pay
Right.
now or you pay later? And I think a lot of people don't really see it that way of like compound interest doesn't just work with money. It
That's
works with
right.
your health, right? How
That,
many times a day are you eating food? At least three times. And with most modern Americans, we're snacking all the time throughout the day, which is a
that's
whole
right.
nother story for our metabolism and stuff. But
Uh,
yeah, it's interesting, and I'm really grateful that we've had this conversation, and that I don't know if you remember, if you recall, but I was basically invited by one of your friends to come to your speech because I was at a farmer's market, and
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I decided to buy some corn from this local farmer, right? Know your farmer. Buy local food. It's healthier, it's more nutrient dense, and you're supporting local business. And I was like getting some corn and I was like talking to the guy as I was checking out. I was like, I never buy corn because corn in America is absolute crap, right? Like 96% of it is genetically modified.
Right.
And people don't realize it's like there's like 52 different ingredients in the modern food system that are derived from GMO corn, causes a lot of issues. And so she was like, "Oh yeah, like I make corn all the time. I get local organic corn. This is how you do it." And then she gave me her card and I got invited to your event. So very grateful that that happened. I don't believe anything's
That's great.
random. And so, yeah, it's all about being on the right vibration. And I
That's
just
right.
really appreciate this conversation. If people want to learn more about your work or your protocol, I mean, curing your fatigue, like especially as when I went through my burnout, like the afternoon energy crashes and the
Hmm.
gut health issues, it's been really eye-opening to learn more about copper. And I'm sure there's many factors as to why people get sick and whatnot, but copper seems to be a huge, obviously, root cause. And so, if people want to learn more about your protocol or get your book or check out your website, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the website is therootcauseprotocol.com. You can go to the resources tab at that website and request the starter guide, 16-page um, document that lays out the rationale for the protocol, but introduces you to the stops and starts. And it was really funny when I was talking to the Sam Fisher just before we were getting started. I've known Sam for 4 years now. He's Amish, runs a very successful grain and feed business in Indiana for the community, principally for the Amish farmers. He's known about the RCP for 4 years, and by a quirk of fate, time was right. Someone gave him the starter guide, and he took the time to read it. And that's what got him started. He realized, oh my gosh, I've known about this for whatever reason he wasn't ready until today. And what he was telling me just before we started is how grateful he was for that
Mm,
starter guide. So for people looking for a basic primer on how to change your life, and
hmm
it's not a diet, it is a lifestyle.
hmm
So that would be one site that you mentioned the book. Go to Barnes and
Yeah,
Noble,
the
Barnes
book
and
right here,
Noble.
it's great. Been
Yeah,
diving in.
or go to Amazon and you can pick up the book. It's a second edition. We're actually selling 80% more copies with the second edition. So I thought,
Wow.
sweet. I'm
Mm.
really pleased with that. It's not a bestseller. I'm not going to become independently wealthy off that book, but I'm touching lives, which is really what
That's
it's
the
all
most
about.
important thing. Orange is also my favorite color, so this is divine. It's
There you
cool.
go.
I like to read, but honestly, it sounds cliche. It's like if you don't have a good book that you really are intrigued by, it's hard to
Yep.
keep picking it up. But yeah, the first couple pages, the forward by Ben Edwards, and just it's always
Yep.
interesting to see people kind of from the other side, switch their perspective. So yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely recommend it.
So the other thing people you can there's a community, there's a premium RCP community. People can sign up for that. People want to take the training. We have a 16-week training program that's really designed for the public and practitioners because everyone's on the same page when it
Hmm
comes to minerals. No one knows what the minerals are.
hmm
And we teach people how the body really works. And then I always give out my email and phone number just so people who have questions can track me down. But email is just my first and last names. You see it there at Gmail. And my phone number is area code 847-922-8061. And I'm always amazed at the calls I get worldwide. I mean,
hmm
every day, every week.
hmm
I'm contacted by a number of people seeking clarification, asking questions. So that's
hmm
just part of the purpose. My mission is to get people aware of this and happy to educate people wherever possible. So I appreciate the chance to have this conversation and kind of have more seeds being planted out there to help more people. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, thanks so much for your time. It's been such a fun conversation. I learned a lot myself, and there's a lot of people out there that are very confused about their health, whether it is they are
Absolutely.
working with Western medicine or they're working with a naturopath. And I think everyone is well intended. It's just, you can't change what you're not aware of. And so that's where it all starts. And it
That's
seems
right.
like copper is a huge missing piece in the modern day world. So I'm personally excited to learn more about it and continue to read this book. I'll probably finish it this weekend, quite frankly. And
That's great.
yeah, your work is so important. So thanks for taking the time today.
Well, let's stay in touch. I look forward to
Definitely.
that. Okay.
Sounds good.